It was one of the largest deals that I had at that time. This whole deal was about close to $10 million. This property here was an amazing deal. It was kind of cool. I remember the day this happened, when I got the phone call. Actually, I was buying my first piece of property in Florida, on the beach. I was at that closing when I got a phone call from the owner of this property. She calls me up and she tells me, hey, listen, the owner of the property is selling. Are you interested? And I says, please, 100% I'm interested. It's a lifetime, once in a lifetime would you ever be able to buy something like this, which is crazy in New York City, no matter where it's at in New York City. And I told her yes, because I used to work for the owner. I would be the general contractor. I would come here and fix the buildings. His business was in all these buildings, and I would just come and repair and fix. And I always just tell him, hey, when you're ready to sell, please let me be the first guy. She remembered that. She called me up. I finished that deal in Florida. Next day I flew down here and started negotiating this. It's about 12 buildings here. It was a major, major undertaking. I was put in a situation that it was basically where you're buying all these buildings and they were all vacant. Every window was blocked up. Everything was closed up. 2 tenants out of all of them, out of all these buildings, including the vacant lot in the corner. So basically I had the opportunity to purchase 4 square blocks around. So we're gonna walk, and you see these buildings now. This had to go into, I don't know how many millions of dollars in construction. It was electrical meters, gas meters, windows, doors, brickwork. It was just a construction, probably close to, I would say about $1.5 million to $2 million it cost to put this all together. But then also purchasing it. So first thing we had to do is find the money, because it came in a time that I only had X amount of dollars. I didn't have a lot of money. So I had to start becoming creative how I can raise the funds to make the down payment and have a way of being creative to be a creative financing. Because again, when I purchased this, the banks were not interested in these neighborhoods. The banks were not even lending money that much at that time. I think we were coming out of one of the recessions, I think it was, at that time when I purchased this. So loans, really wasn't gonna happen. The loan would only happen if it was what we call stabilized, meaning that you have an income coming in, there's a lot of tenants in there, and you're drawing in income, and it's producing, income producing property. I didn't have that. So that's when I had to be creative and see that the owner of the property can hold the mortgage. And that's what I had to do. So I had to convince her to say, listen, this is a little difficult. This place is all bad. It's a mess. So we wind up starting. She wind up saying, okay, you know what? I think I put $1 million something down, you know what I mean, at the time. And how that happened was because I was able to remortgage another property that I just happened to fix and finish. I tell you, man, it's amazing how things work out. You know, God works in mysterious ways. So I finished this piece of property. I stabilized it. I got it all income producing and a lot of money coming in, and I remortgaged it and buy this one and give her the down payment. It was one of the largest deals that I had at that time. This whole deal was about close to $10 million, which was, again, shit. I know today they say politically you have to have courage. I'm from Brooklyn. You got to have balls to do something. Where everybody's telling you something, you're going with your gut feeling to say, wait a minute, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make this work that you're going to take a big undertaking. I've always said in life, how could you lose if you're buying something at a certain time with real estate? You know, the only way that would anything happen at the end, at the worst, what do? Sell it. That's it. But you still got something to sell. You have something that you've already inquired, right? So these buildings here, we had to start the minute we got the money from that other building. That is what we used for the down payment. The owner held the mortgage and allowed me about 2 years, I think it was, to stabilize the property. And that's when we went into action. That's when I had construction sites and job sites and putting the money in. Every dime that I can find was to start one building. You start with one building first. Stabilize one floor first. So you got that building, After that building, you get one floor. And what we did is we got the corner building and we stabilized the top floor. That building, that top floor, we put all the money in there right away, renovated it to a certain point, and then rented out. At that time, I think we rented it out for $5,000, $4,000 that year. Now, since you're paying, $30,000, I think, a month, was it? Or $25,000 a month? That was my mortgage payment. Never mind the property tax, never mind the insurance. So there's a lot of soft costs that comes into buildings that a lot of people forget, and they're not told this. And that's the biggest problem. You gotta remember, yeah, that's the mortgage payment. So, okay, what about the property tax? What about the insurance? You know what I mean? You got a big undertaking to make sure that you cover it, just to maintain it. What about the heating, the water? So there's a lot that's behind a piece of property that you gotta remember these things and take into consideration that number, that soft cost number, because you gotta pay that no matter who's in here and who owns it. So the construction is where we picked up and we started now getting the top floor done. I think within a few months, we were able to get that first floor, that top floor, fourth floor done. And that was a blessing of God. At the same time, a gentleman came down and he was looking for a space. He was actually just walking in the area looking for space to rent. I was outside and I said, wait a minute, what are you looking for? Oh, do you know if this building's for rent? I says, yes. It was like God sent him, you know what I mean? He was a pharmaceutical distributor. So he needed the 6,000 square feet to stick all the medicine in. All the pharmaceutical products that he started selling to the pharmacies. It was a blessing. And mind you, Red Hook was not the best place. It was one of the most, how can I say? If you wasn't born and raised here, you wouldn't come here. It was a very, very difficult area to even live in. It was all drug infested, gangs, killings, the usual madness that happened in the 80s, with crack and everything else. So that's what you were up against. So to come up against that, I had to come up with a strategy too, because now, I don't know, you got 60, 70,000 square feet of empty space. You got to now market this. Back then, it was not the technology that we have now, There was not so many different websites that you can go on to market these buildings. You were very limited, especially coming to Red Hook. It was not the greatest place to come, because most of the time you get robbed. That was the biggest thing. What I did was I lowered the rents to make it more interesting for the person to come. I figured, let me figure out what if he were to get robbed, if he were to get broken into, what would it cost to fix it again? What would it cost his losses? So you discounted the rent. It was a strategy that worked, because at the end of the day, people started coming. And the biggest people that started coming for me was I brought in the artists. The artists is what made a big thing for me, because once I started getting one or two of them, they started coming. They loved the loft space. And they basically came, and that's how I started renting the other floors. And remember, this is commercial industrial. So as an owner, you're basically only taking care of the structure, the roofs, the windows, the major stuff. Now the interior, it was up to them. I had no part of that. At that point, wherever they want to put the closets, the rooms, the partitions, divide their office up, their shops, whatever it was, they take over that. They're the ones that do that. So as we're going this way, you stabilize one building, then you go to the next building. Before you know it, that 30-something thousand a month started cutting down. So we started getting, 8,000 here, 4,000 here. Now you're down to 20,000. You're down to 8,000. Before you know it, you're stabilizing the property. It takes time, but before you know it, you're making a cash flow. Now you're starting to make money. Now you're covering your expenses, you're covering your taxes, your insurances, and everything that you need to pay out. And then you have extra money left over, right? Which is the cash flow. 3 years later, I think it was, I was able to now market the building to banks and get a mortgage to pay off the owner. So there's a lot of also learning, because now this is a bigger scale. It's not a 3-family, it's not a 6-family. This is industrial space. This is factories. This is warehouses. So it's a different type of animal. This is not something I recommend for people to get involved with right away. You need to learn and you need to go up the ladder, That's all future gotta rewrite. This magic moment.